gather in them so much. Oh my god, there's literally there's an eyelash stuck to it. No, stop. It has changed my whole life. And wiggle. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So I was thinking of video ideas, and I was mostly kind of thinking of TikTok video ideas at the time, and I thought maybe I should do a video about sort of like my top 10 makeup tips that completely changed my makeup life. But then I thought, well, I could make that a TikTok, but it would also actually make quite a good full in-depth YouTube video. This kind of video maybe will help some people. You might already know all of these things. Some of them are very self-explanatory, but just in case you don't, these are the things that I do that are so helpful when I'm doing my makeup. So the first thing that I've learned over the years of doing my makeup is that skin prep is actually quite important. I never used to really moisturize my face in the mornings because I used to have really oily skin as a teenager. It's still relatively oily now. I don't need to tell you if you've watched my videos for a while. But as I've got older, my skin has got more dry. However, when I did have oily skin, wasn't really using a moisturizer in the morning. And there were also times where I wouldn't go in with a moisturizer, I wouldn't use a primer. Back in the day, I didn't even used to use an SPF on my face. But even if you do have oily skin, I would recommend using a lighter moisturizer. You don't have to use anything too thick. Just because when you strip your face of all its natural oils, it then tries to overcompensate by producing more oil, so then you might get more oily throughout the day. And also as well, on any skin type, foundation will probably sit better if you have a slightly moisturized piece of skin underneath it. And I actually find on the days where I've done like, I don't know, like a face mask or something, or used a thicker moisturizer, my foundation looks nicer by the end of the day because it doesn't sort of like suck the moisture out of your skin and then create loads of texture. So if you find that you're getting loads of texture when you are putting your foundation on, try moisturizing, especially in those areas where you're getting the texture. A lot of people get it like around their nose or on their chin, and especially if you have dry skin. My favorite two moisturizers for using under my makeup are this one, which is the Versed Dew Point Moisturising Gel Cream. This is a nice sort of like lighter weight moisturizer, but it still feels hydrating. But at the moment, because my skin is feeling particularly dry, I think because of the cold weather, I'm doing 2 layers of this, but that is because I've just run out of my Embyrolisse Lait Creme Concentrate Cream, which is my favorite moisturizer to wear under my makeup. However, I will go in with this, and then I go in with my SPF, which oily skin people, maybe try and find a moisturizer that has got SPF in it, so you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you know. I love this SPF. I've spoken about it a lot. It's the Bondi Sands SPF 50+ face SPF, obviously. And I wear SPF 50 every single day. That's another little tip if you want to not damage your skin. But yeah, skincare and like skin prep is important. And if you find that your foundation is sort of like balling up and going weird over the top of your moisturizer, try a different moisturizer, because it might just be the moisturizer that you're using doesn't like work well with your foundation. And even down to like if you have a big event or something, maybe exfoliate your skin that morning if you have any sort of like, I don't know, clogged pores or little dry bits. I'm no skincare expert. These are just things that work for me. Or do like a nice face mask or something. And it is perfectly fine if you want to just use a moisturizer and then not use primer. You don't have to use primer. It's just like an extra thing that you can do. So if you do have oily skin, maybe you could go in with a light moisturizer and then maybe like a mattifying primer just on the areas where you need it. Tip number 2, which not everybody might agree with, but it personally works for me. Make sure the areas where you usually crease the most are hydrated. For me, it is my smile lines. I have always, since I was a teenager, had very deep set smile lines, and I do smile a lot. I'm a pretty smiley person, but it's mostly kind of genetic that when I stop smiling, they are very pronounced, and my makeup would gather in them so much. I used to talk about it all the time. At one point I was even considering getting filler in my smile lines because I was so self-conscious of it. But the thing that helped me, oh my god, I've just realised I forgot to put earrings in. I feel so naked. Oh, that is so much better. One of the reasons why my makeup was gathering so much in my smile lines before is because 1, I was wearing such a thick layer of foundation that there was just so much product sitting there. And 2, that back in the day, all of my products were matte. It was like matte primer, matte foundation, matte concealer, matte powder, like the driest, thickest layer of makeup. And so it gathered and was so obvious in my smile lines. However, I have found that keeping them hydrated, and this also kind of applies for your under eyes as well, really helps. And what I like to do for this, I know it's kind of weird because it's not what it's designed for, but is to use an eye cream. People bash eye creams because it's not like something that you need, and it's kind of just like a moisturizer in a small tube. And I also like to put a little bit on my lips, but I don't do this every day because most of the time like my moisturizer is enough. But just to show you, like say for example you don't want to put like a thicker moisturizer all over your face, definitely make sure that you moisturize the areas of your skin that are feeling a little bit more dry, and also the areas of your skin where you find your makeup sort of like gathers and clings to those areas. So I'm just going to put a little bit under my eyes. I think what it is that when it's more hydrated, the makeup kind of like moves more freely and doesn't sort of like solidify solidify and like dry out in those areas. I don't know the science, okay? I also find that using a more hydrating foundation helps as well. This one is so random, and I've mentioned this on TikTok before. Tip number 3 is to use a warm beauty blender to blend out your makeup. A lot of people, when they go and run their beauty sponge under the tap, they will use like freezing cold water, and then when you're applying it to your face, I don't know, one, I don't find that it feels as nice. Yes, it kind of does feel quite refreshing, and probably in the summer is quite nice, but I don't know if it's just a placebo effect. I don't know if it's just a myth, but I seem to find that my makeup goes on smoother when I rinse my beauty blender under warm or hot water. I usually do it in like quite hot water, so that by the time I've sort of like squeezed all the water out, squeezed it in a towel, then when I come to apply my makeup, my beauty blender feels warm, and I feel like it just melts my makeup in a bit better. Maybe you prefer a cold beauty blender, and maybe I am chatting shit and it doesn't actually really make a difference, but I feel like it does make a bit of a difference, especially for concealer. Sometimes I feel like if I use a cold beauty blender, my concealer doesn't blend out as smoothly. Please let me know down below if you find the same thing, or if I have just made this up in my head. By the way, this is the Coco Cosmetics by Chloe Marshmallow Sponge. I think this one is shape 2. My favourite is shape 1, the like pointed one. I'm pretty sure this one is shape 2. These ones look so cute, and they are so unbelievably squishy, but I actually find them a bit too big for my face. Like, how am I supposed to get under my eye with this? Also, if you guys down below have got any of your makeup tips that have sort of like change the way that you apply your makeup, please let us know. Let me know. Okay, so I'm just applying a little bit of concealer. Actually, this is probably too much concealer. There was me being like less is more product when it comes to creases and stuff. I probably do wear too much concealer. If you find that your concealer creases a lot under your eyes, try applying a little bit less of it. When I've watched a lot of makeup artists, they say that you should just do like a little bit of concealer. I just automatically swipe on a bit. Tip number 4, if you have a spot, so I've got like 2 little X spots here which are slowly fading away. This one is a big scar. It's one that has been around for ages, but if you have a spot that you can't cover, leave your concealer on it while you're doing sort of like the rest of your makeup, or for like a few minutes while you're doing something else. Leave your concealer on that spot to dry a little bit before you try and blend it out, and when you do blend it out, do it very gently instead of sort of like swiping over the whole area. Something that really helps is sort of like going around the blemish and then just dabbing over the very middle of it very gently, so that you don't wipe off excess product. But I'm gonna leave this to sit for a little bit. Actually, is that gonna be possible with such a big sponge? I don't know. Let me try and fold this down so I don't. Okay, I may have to reapply that spot concealer to leave there. Oh, and I should have said at the start of this video, I'm not a trained makeup artist. I have just learned lots of things about makeup from the internet and from makeup artists and different makeup masterclasses and watching other people do their makeup and trial and error. Like, there's so many things that I've learned over the years just from doing my own makeup that I figured that kind of really work for me. And so yes, I'm not a professional, but a lot of these tips I found really have helped me, so I thought that they might help some of you too. So let me just reapply that. Tip number 5, which comes back to what I was saying about my smile lines. If you find that your makeup gathers there, try and put as little product there as possible. And that may be quite hard if you're putting foundation all over your face and you don't want there to be any sort of like weird gaps. What I find really helps when I'm having times when my makeup is just settling in here is to remove a bit of the product from them. It really doesn't help that I've got a smile line that's pretty much sitting on my spot. You can take a cotton bud, or you can take a small brush, or you can take the other side of your beauty blender. And I'm just gonna sort of like push my tongue out like that, wipe away what's sort of sitting there, and then literally use the excess from my beauty blender to just sort of blend it back in so that it doesn't look like a big stripe. And I mean, today I'm not wearing a super heavy foundation, I'm literally using a skin tint kind of thing. But if you're wearing a thicker foundation, like a fuller coverage one, and you don't want it to settle in your smile lines, remove some of the excess product there. The less product that you have sitting there, the less there is to actually gather in that little crevice. Same applies for your under eyes. So I'm just gonna, where I get the creases, remove a little bit of that concealer and then just dab over it. I'm just gonna take a small brush. This one, oh my god, there's literally there's an eyelash stuck to it. Take a little brush and just gently sort of tap over the edges. And I get it, like there are some spots that are actually pretty difficult to cover and they just don't want to stay covered, but I find that this helps to build the coverage a little bit more. And then I'm just going around the edges with my sponge. And also as well, if you do have spots that have been sort of like drying out and you've been using spot treatments on them, make sure that you moisturize them before you put on your makeup. Otherwise the makeup will sort of cling to those areas where it's a bit drier, where the spot's been drying out. This next tip is so simple and it's just kind of like a given, I think anyway, but then I still get people asking me questions about this. And it is when you're applying your cream products on your cheeks like this is the Kiko contour stick in 201. If you just go in like this and like rub and smear that product all around, it's going to remove and disturb your foundation underneath. When you're applying cream products to your cheeks, I find it easiest to just tap and keep tapping over that area until it is blended out. I think I've actually put on a little bit too much of this. I know, Oh no, it's okay, I can save it. Is to literally tap in sort of like circular motions, and instead of sort of like blending it down your face this way, you want to sort of like tap upwards. I just do these tiny sort of like stippling circular motions almost. I just find that it blends so much easier. If it's a bit more of a stubborn one to blend out, then you can do sort of like mini swiping motions just to like blend it a little bit, but then make sure that you keep sort of like tapping over it so that it doesn't leave sort of streaks in it. On the nose though, I find that it kind of works when I do this sort of motion, but not on my cheeks, which is really odd. I think because on my nose I always go back in with my sponge to sort of soften it out a bit, and also on the rest of my face as well. I've not used this blush in a while. This is the Made by Mitchell liquid blush in Peach Sugar, which is my favourite shade of his blushes. I've just been using some of the other shades. Make sure that you are tapping instead of swiping. It just gives a much more seamless blend, I find. And then if you put too much on like I do every single time, go back and move your sponge. This sponge is too big for my face. I feel like I've just put blush everywhere now. And then I will just rub off that kind of like blush and bronzer from my sponge on the back of my hand usually. Tip number 7 is the most important thing that I do in my makeup routine, and not everybody does this. I see people on TikTok not doing this and I'm like, no, stop. Before you set your concealer under your eyes, or before you set your makeup, the second before you add your powder, take your sponge and re-blend out that concealer, because already just from sitting here it starts to settle. And I mean, some people I guess don't have little lines in their eyes or little like creases or anything, but if you find that your concealer looks creased even as soon as you've set it, don't give it that time to settle. So what I do, this actually goes hand in hand with tip number 8, and something that I've discovered recently, which is not a new thing at all. I am 100 years late to this trend. It's not even a trend. Is if you find that you crease easily under your eyes, use a powder puff to apply your powder. So I'm going to do both of these things at the same time. You don't need tons of powder. I like to put on a lot of powder, and that's okay, but you don't need that much powder. If you want to, you can just take a tiny little dab, like literally just the end of your powder puff. For some reason, I find that using one of these just really helps to almost like push the powder into the creases before it has a chance to settle. Whereas with a brush, I find that not always, like unless it's a super dense brush, I can't always get like the powder all the way into those creases. And I know that a lot of makeup artists advise using like a really small brush and just a tiny amount of powder. I personally don't find that that works for me, and when I have had my makeup done professionally on like shoots and stuff, they will use like a tiny bit of concealer and then a tiny bit of powder under my eyes, but I find that by the end of the day my under eyes are so creased. So this is just what personally works for me. Everybody is different. I know that makeup artists probably don't advise this, but it works for me. Okay, so I'm taking this Colourpop powder, which is the no filter setting powder. I've got the translucent one. I love this stuff. So I'm just taking a tiny bit on my powder puff. I'm gonna go back in with my ginormous sponge, and I do one eye at a time. Get rid of those creases and then sort of do that and look crazy. Squint my eye a little bit, take that little bit of powder and just push it in. Again, dabbing, don't swipe. Dab, 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 dab. All under my eye. And that is the best way that I found to stop my under eyes from creasing. So I like to load up my powder puff before I blend, so I'll kind of hold them both at the same time and just blend that little crease out, put that down, keep my eye sort of like this, and then push that powder in. Doing both of these things in combination is just an absolute game changer. And then I do like to go a bit crazy with the powder on the rest of my face. It's just what works for me. It's what I like to do. It stops me from getting crazy oily, but I just tend to use the powder puff for like around my eyes and cheeks to really push it in. And then because it does take a bit more effort on the rest of my face, I tend to use a brush. And by the way, the same thing goes when you apply makeup to the rest of your face. If you find that when you're applying your powder, it just takes off your foundation, instead of swiping, try pressing it into your face rather than doing this. And by the way, you don't have to follow my advice. You might not like the way that I do my makeup, and that is actually totally fine. Like, I don't mind. This is just the things that I like to do for my own face, and you may have tried some of these things and they might not work for you, and that is also okay. Like, it's all about sort of trial and error. If you're doing eyeshadow, by the way, I wouldn't recommend setting your eyelids before you've done your eye primer. I just realized I can't count, and I've got 12 makeup tips, not 10. But I'm probably gonna call this video 10 just because that sounds a bit more catchy than 12. Tip number 9 is if you do have any stubborn spots that you found that once you've set your face, they're still poking through, like you can still see this one a little bit, I would just leave this because I'm not particularly bothered by it. However, if you do want a bit of extra coverage, try using a tiny little bit of powder foundation just on the spot. Not the area around the spot, literally just on the spot. So take a small brush, this is the same one that I used for the concealer, and some recommendations that I have are the Benefit Hello Happy foundation. This one has got really good coverage. It's a very underrated product, I think, actually. The L'Oreal L'Oreal Infallible 24-Hour Fresh Wear Powder Foundation is really good for covering spots. The Maybelline Superstay Powder Foundation as well has also got pretty good coverage, so I'm just going to use a tiny little bit of this, literally just on the spot, nowhere else. I don't really think I have many like life-changing tips for powder, bronzer and blush and highlighter and stuff. Make sure you tap your brush off. And same for eyebrows. I don't think I have any sort of like life-changing eyebrow tips, but if you do, please make sure to leave them below. Okay, so tip number 10, if you struggle to do winged eyeliner and you would like some sort of guide, I mean, yes, you can do tape and stuff, but you might end up getting the tape at the wrong angles. Take an eyeshadow that isn't too dark, that's maybe like a few shades darker than your skin tone. Maybe you could even use your bronzer. I'm going to take this shade from my palette called Cookie Dough, and I'm taking a little angled brush, and what I'm going to do is sort of use this as my guide, because if you get the angle wrong, you can so much more easily wipe it off. So I'm just starting from my outer corners and on this little brush. One good tip that I saw is that you should try and sort of like line it up with the angle of your lower lash line, so where that ends, and just sort of like extend it upwards. And I find it easiest to do my eyeliner when I've got my eyes open to get the initial shape of the wing. And I mean, you could even just leave it at that, or maybe even use a darker eyeshadow, like one of these ones, to then do your wing. But once I've sort of got the angle right, and if you do realise that you've got it wrong, actually don't use a spoolie, it's a little bit rough. You could go back in with your powder puff and just sort of like wipe it away. And then it's so much easier than having to remove a thick black or brown liquid liner that you've done in the wrong place. So use the lighter eyeshadow as a guide first. And then once you're happy with that, then you can go in with your liquid liner straight over the top of it. And this is the Fenty Beauty liquid liner, Flyliner in Big Truffle. So I'm then just following that exact shape where I've done my eyeshadow. And there you go. There's a handy little tip if you struggle to get the wing of your eyeliner in the right place. Actually, I would advise doing both of your eyes first. I was just showing you this as an example, but do it on both of your eyes to make sure that they match up to the same angle. And the one thing that I would say about winged liner is it comes with practice. Even today, I don't get it right all the time. Number 11, the second to last tip that I'm going to give you guys. Do your setting spray before your mascara. I don't know if this is just me and my lashes, but if I do my setting spray after I've done my mascara, I find that it just makes my mascara run, and then it all like dots underneath my eyes or up here and it smudges. I don't get, like, I see people doing their setting spray at the very end of their makeup, and I'm like, how are you doing that without smudging your mascara? And I just love setting spray in general. I never used to use them, and since I have been using them, it has changed my whole life. I'm going to do my lips very quickly. This is the Rare Beauty Matte Lip Liner in Humble. I don't think I've tried this shade. Oh, but it's really nice. I don't really think I have any tips for my lips. This is the Fenty Beauty Slip Shine Sheer Lipstick in 05 Glazed. My final makeup tip that I've spoken about all throughout the history of my channel. When you're applying your mascara, don't just do this. And I think I've spoken about this recently in a video, probably testing a mascara. Don't just do this and apply it, because you're not going to get much volume that way. I mean, you can do that. If you like to do it that way, then absolutely fine. Do whatever works for you, but just sort of applying your mascara straight up, you're not going to get the volume out of your mascara that you want. Get it right at the root and wiggle. Grip the mascara wand onto your lashes and wiggle. Wiggle, 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 and wiggle about 5 times to get that mascara to the base of your lashes. Not only does it help sort of like push them upwards, and also very helpful to look down into a mirror so that you don't get it all over your eyelids, and pull upwards. And if you do get any on your skin, I guess tip 13, do not touch that mascara yet. Wait until the very end for it to dry and then flick it off with a spoolie. Don't touch it when it's wet because it will just smear. But same, flip the mascara wand around for the inner corners, wiggle at the roots, and then drag upwards. Wiggle. It's more of a flick that I do. And then once I've got all the volume at the roots of my lashes, I then focus on the tips of my lashes. Try and like flick off any clumps that I can see. Do you see the difference? Now I'm going to go back in on this side, wiggle again. And then once I've wiggled, I then use the brush to comb through everything, pinch off any clumps, and there you go. And for the lower lashes, I find it more helpful to look up into a mirror, hold the mirror a bit higher, and just do a little mini wiggle, and then drag down. And then for those little pesky bits that got on my lid, now that they're dry, take a spoolie and just flick it off. Because if you touch them when they're wet, they will just smear all over your eyes. Whereas if you wait for them to dry, you can just brush them off. And those are 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 makeup tips that really changed my whole makeup routine. And this is how I do my makeup in a way that makes me feel good and I think looks quite nice and it helps my makeup last a hell of a lot longer. If you did find this helpful, please give it a thumbs up. That would really help me out. And if you like this style of video and you would like to subscribe, the button is down here somewhere. It is free to subscribe. Turn on my notifications so that you will get notified every time I post. If you have any tips yourself, leave them down below in the comments, and I hope you guys are good, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!